I am the treasurer for MACNA, and on behalf of Orca and MACNA, we'd like to welcome you to Orlando. Everybody having a good time? Nice weather down here. I flew down from Connecticut like 2 days ago, and it was like 95 degrees, muggy, humid. I talked to my wife this morning. It's now about 70 degrees. Hurricane Earl flew through there, cooled things off, dried things up, so definitely a little different. Just a reminder, if you're sitting in the front 2 rows here, you should be a MACNA member. Have a nice little MACNA sticker on your name badge. Also like to ask everybody to turn your iPhones, your cell phones, at least throw them on mute. It's greatly appreciated. Are we doing questions and answers after the presentation? Okay, at the end of today's presentation, we'll have some time for a question and answer, so we ask that you hold your questions until that time. Today's talk is giant clams, the identification and evolution and husbandry of these giant clams in our aquariums. Our presenter is Mr. Julian Sprung. He is the 2004 MACNA Award winner. He's graduated with a degree in zoology from the University of Florida and the co-founder of Two Little Fishies. He's been doing marine aquariums for over 30 years. He is a photographer and author. What's that? Close to 40 years. His books include The Reef Aquarium, volumes 1 through 3, The Algae, A Problem Solver Guide, and Julian can also be found out here at the Two Little Fishies booth, out in the MACNA exhibition area. So with that, I'd like to welcome Julian Sprung.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for the great introduction, and thanks also again to Orca for putting on a wonderful conference. I'm really enjoying myself so far, and wow, what a crowd. Well, today I'm going to talk about the tridacnid clams, as you well know, and I'm going to mainly focus on features of their structure and taxonomy. I'm not going to be in the lecture talking so much about how to set up an aquarium for either growing them or breeding or raising them, but you're welcome to ask questions about that after the talk. I will be sharing a few new ideas, some of which are strictly my own opinion. I'll do my best to be clear about that. And those are mainly taxonomical issues. And I'll be showing you some new things that perhaps you haven't seen before. And as most of you know who are fans of the tridacnid clams, you'll be seeing some real eye candy as well. So let's continue. What are giant clams? Well, there are 2 genera that are in this group, the Tridacna and Hippopus. And they're very, very closely related clams. I'll just describe them as we look into the different species. Well, where do these things come from? Where did they evolve? They are an offshoot of the cockle family, and maybe the name cockle doesn't mean a whole lot to you unless you're a shell collector. You can find cockle shells out on the beaches here in Florida. I'll show you a picture of what they look like. But their structure is quite different from the average clam, which lives buried in the sand with its siphon and mantles. The mantle is tucked in and siphon coming up to stick out of the sand. The hinge and the umbo have actually rotated around 180 degrees. And that orientation and change has allowed the clams to be able to expose their mantle to the light, which illuminates the photosynthetic zooxanthellae that live in their tissues. This picture shows very nicely. Let me grab. Let's see. I don't have a pointer there, but we'll get this one. That's a cockle right there. And none of these are giant clams, but they're relatives. This is a cockle. This is an intermediate genus, and I can't remember the name of it right now. This is a hard shell, which is Corculum. But you can see the similarity here with these red freckles, and notice this primary rib there, and it's actually on the outside here, on the hard shell. And you find it in Hippopus, it's still retained there, and the Hippopus also has those red freckles. That's why it's called sometimes strawberry clam. So you can really see the relation in these. And it was interesting to see how this shape has modified. And by the way, these two clams, although they are not giant clams, they both have symbiotic zooxanthellae. And I don't know why they have not entered the aquarium trade. They are possible to maintain in aquariums with bright illumination. They live in sand beds in the Indo-Pacific. They don't open up where you would see a pretty mantle, but in fact they have a very thin shell that allows the light to pass through the shell. So these have a slightly different lifestyle than the true tridacnids. This is a photograph from one of Daniel Knope's books, where he shows that primary rib on the hard shell corculum, and then here's Hippopus. You see it retained there. Let's talk about some fossils. One of the earliest known fossils of a tridacnid clam comes from here, from Florida. It's not definitively proven that it is a tridacnid clam. It's given the name Hippopus gunterli, and that's it right there. So it's really only a fragment, and it sure looks like it could be a Hippopus. This is from the side. So you can see it does have that same shape as you would see on the underside of a tridacnid clam. This is a true tridacnid fossil that was recently described and discovered in Oman, which is sort of the origin of the group. So this is Tridacna eve. You can think of the Garden of Eden of tridacnid clams being in Oman. From the Oligocene. And you look at this shell, and you have to bear in mind that it's a fossil. It is not the actual shell that you're looking at. What you're looking at is a mold. It's the stuff, the mud that was inside the shell. So you're viewing the inside architecture in this case. I'll show you some photographs of Hippopus. Why am I not remembering the name? There's Hippopus and Hippopus porcellanus. The juvenile Hippopus porcellanus I'll show you later, and think about Tridacna eve when you're looking at that. Also found in Oman in the same general vicinity is this new genus Omanodacna eos, which is basically Hippopus with subtle, very, very, very subtle differences that the authors of this paper decided were enough to erect a new genus, which is always amusing that you look at a fossil, you never see the live animal, and you say, well, it's got a couple of teeth different, and let's give it a new genus. But quite amazing to look back so many millions of years, right to the origin, the earliest known fossils, and damned if they don't look exactly like the ones that exist today. And it's always fascinating to me to see that. Is that kind of dark on the screen there? On my screen, it's not quite as dark. I don't know if somebody can play with the contrast a bit. Now, in the literature, there's a reference to tridacnids found in Europe. Of course, we know that the Tethys Sea went across the European region, and so you did have tropical corals. In fact, you can go to Paris. In some places, there's fossils of Acropora in Paris. The world has changed a lot. But I believe that this fossil that was described from Poland may in fact not be a true fossil. Some of the literature suggests that it was something brought, granted a long time ago, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, by a sailor, and then had been quite an eroded shell. So there's some doubts as to whether this was a real fossil. It was described as Tridacna media, but it may in fact be just maxima. Okay, what makes giant clams so special? Well, I mentioned their orientation to light. They have symbiotic zooxanthellae. colorful mantles, and a few species grow to a very large size for a clam. I believe this picture is from James' book. Is this from your book, or is this from Dan? Yeah. I've got several pictures here that James Fothery graciously allowed me to include because they help illustrate some of my points very, very well. This is an unusually colored specimen of Tridacna crocea. And all the different species have variation in color form, and that's what makes them so popular with aquarists. This is a photograph showing the mantle, a sliced section of the mantle where you can see those little dots are zooxanthellae, and you can also make out some of the digestive system and tubes in which they normally are residing. Because tridacnid clams have symbiotic zooxanthellae, then of course they suffer some of the same kinds of bleaching and pigment loss that you can see in coral.